Sometimes I have a favorite shirt that I just don't want to put on the rag pile, and a little mending is in order. And I love to do handwork, but not so much mending type handwork. So with all the really beautiful examples of visible mending that I've seen lately, you know me, I have to try it on my sewing machine. And I have a couple of ideas to give you for mending holes in your garments and giving them a little extra wear and some style too. This is just a pair of jeans that I have done 2 techniques on. I want to show you in just a few minutes. We're going to do a stitching technique that looks a lot like the visible mending. And also just to show you how you can use embroidery designs to cover holes. And with embroidery in mind, there actually are a couple of holes in this shirt. And you'd never know it unless you had seen me wear it before the embroidery was there. So I actually was able to position the embroidery so it covered up the holes, and just like that, I can wear my shirt again. This one I brought because although it's been in my closet for a little while, and this one actually is hand embroidered, I actually had someone stop me once, tap me on the shoulder and say, "Excuse me, you have a bee on your skirt," which was just perfect because it's an embroidered bee, but it fooled her just long enough to start a good conversation. When I'm using my sewing machine to do mending, I like to look at different threads that I can use. Heavyweight threads in particular are great for this because they're a little closer to the heft that we associate with hand embroidery threads. And if you're using a heavyweight thread in your sewing machine, it's a good idea to use a top stitching needle because they're specially made with a larger eye and scarf so that they protect the heavier threads and keep them from shredding as you sew. I also like to use variegated and multicolored threads because that just gives a little extra life to a very simple stitch. The first step when you're repairing a garment is to prepare the garment for the repair. And I have a pair of jeans here that, as you can see, they have a hole, and I am going to get these ready for one of our techniques here in just a minute. But I'm working primarily today on this flat piece because it's just going to be a little easier for you to see what I'm doing. So on the wrong side of my garment, I make a patch out of an iron-on interfacing. The difference between iron-on and fusible is often that the iron-on is intended to be there permanently. So if you do machine embroidery and you talk about adhesive or temporary iron-ons, then those can be peeled off again later. And I think I used the wrong word. Fusible interfacing is what I meant to say. And the fusibles are the ones that are meant to stay there permanently. I also like to use a pair of pinking shears when I cut a patch out of an iron-on fusible product. And that's because 2 reasons. When you fuse this in place, those little peaks and valleys help the edge grip the fabric better, so it's harder to pull it off. And the second reason is that you don't get a ridge visible on the right side of your fabric where the cut edge of that patch is. So the wrong side of the fabric, we start with an iron-on, a permanent fusible interfacing that's going to stay put on our project. And then on the outside, for this kind of mending, we're going to put a piece of water-soluble adhesive stabilizer. This is going to go away completely when we're finished, so it doesn't matter what it looks like. And I've also taken the time just to draw a little circle around the edges of my hole, because you may think that you can see that hole really well, but I find when I get to my machine to work with the machine lights on, it's hard to see the hole, and this just helps me make sure that I put the repair in the right place. So come on over to the machine with me and let me show you how we're going to repair this pair of jeans. For this kind of mending, this is the water-soluble adhesive that I've put on the inside of my pants. You can see there. And I'm going to take another piece of that. We just peel off the backing, and that goes right on top, covers up our edges. And then we're going to take that to the machine and slip that right over the free arm. And the other thing to remember in doing this is that it's okay if you have a little bit of the fabric gathered up to the side, as long as you've got a flat area right here under your foot. Then I'm going to the screen on my sewing machine, and I'm going to choose what's called a directional stitch. And if you'll notice on the screen, this shows straight stitches and zigzag stitches with arrows beside. And each one of those is going to let me sew in a different direction. We've got backward, forward, side to side, and even diagonally. So let's start with the forward stitch. Then I lower my presser foot and I just sew right across the hole on top of the stabilizer. You can change your direction to go to the back. And instead of sewing exactly on top of the same stitches, I'm just going to tilt this a little bit to one side as I go back and forth to make a sort of grid work of stitches. And then when I'm ready to change direction, we'll go back to about the center. And now I'm going to choose one of my side-to-side stitches. And this is when it really starts to look a little different, because now the machine is going to feed the fabric from one side to the other. And it's the same back and forth, just changing the stitch each time. But you can keep building this up until you have a nice little grid of stitches going in both directions. You could even add the diagonal stitches if you wanted to. And your aim is to completely, more or less completely, cover up that hole, so all you're left with is the nice embroidered back and forth stitches. And that makes a fun mend on your jeans. Now let me take a minute and switch my machine over for embroidery, and I'll show you how to put an embroidery design on top of a hole. Let's talk about using an embroidery design done in a hoop to mend a hole in your garment. And again, this is where I'm going to be using a flat piece of fabric to demonstrate. And the reason is, if you want to put a mending design on a garment, you generally need to start by turning it wrong side out. And you'll use adhesive stabilizer that I'm about to show you and stick it to your embroidery hoop. It works great, but it's not the best thing for showing you how it looks when I'm doing this process. So we'll save that for another time, and today I'm going to use a flat piece of fabric. I have hooped a piece of adhesive tearaway stabilizer, and this has a paper backing on it. I just take a pair of scissors and score the surface, and then I can peel off this paper, and that exposes the adhesive and makes it ready for me to use. This is an easy way to hoop something that's oddly shaped, and you only have to be sure that you have the backing removed within the area where you're actually going to be doing the stitching. So we take care of that, and then I have my prepared piece of fabric, and this has the iron-on interfacing on the wrong side and the water-soluble stabilizer on the outside. When this is all finished, either one of these techniques that uses the water-soluble, you'll remove that by rinsing it and soaking it in plain water. Most of them, and always read your manufacturer's instructions, but most of them recommend that you don't use any soap or detergent, just plain water, and that will just rinse right out and you'll never know it was there. Okay, so I have my hoop here, and this is turned facing you at the moment. I'm going to mount my fabric on the hoop and press it into place. And then I'm ready to put my hoop on the embroidery machine. And then we're going to the screen of the embroidery machine, where I'm going to choose a design to stitch. And you may not be surprised to hear I already have a favorite one picked out. So let's go and get this little lizard. I'm just fond of him. And then we'll touch set, and there's my design. I'm not going to edit this one today, so I'm ready to go right to the embroidery mode. And then I'm going to turn on the machine's projector. And what that will do is shine a light, literally, on my embroidery hoop. And inside the lighted area, you'll be able to see the outline of my lizard. So I can either drag on screen to get my lizard just where I need him, or I can use the keys, which actually to me is a little bit easier. There's a refresh rate that you have to deal with, so it takes a minute in between to get him just where I need him to be. There we go. And now if you can see that the head of the lizard is exactly on top of the circle that I marked, which is where the hole in my jeans is located. And if you're noticing that the tail of the lizard appears to be cut off, that's not going to happen. The embroidery is going to be there. That's just part of the projection process. So I've got just this area that's being projected onto my fabric. So we're ready to go. We'll touch OK and then hit start, and we're ready to embroider. And all we have to do now is just sit back and watch the amusing entertainment. I still often find myself watching while the machine embroiders. It's almost finished. And then we're ready to take the hoop off the machine. There's our lizard. You can see that the holes disappeared. And what I'll do is just pull to remove this from the tearaway stabilizer and take it out of the hoop. And then take this and soak it, rinse it off and soak it until the square of water-soluble stabilizer disappears. And then I have a wonderfully mended piece of fabric that's ready to go. And in case you're wondering about durability, I used to do this to mend my children's clothes. Somewhere at home, I think I still have a pair of pants where the patch outlasted the pants fabric around it. I hope this will be a useful and fun technique for you to try as well.